Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's a different video. We're sat in our office here and it does feel like I'm being interviewed, but this is another video that was heavily requested from you guys and from some of Josie's subscribers, which is relating to my sobriety. I'm now nearly 6 years sober. It'll be 6 years in August, and I've had lots of people, I get lots of questions on Instagram almost daily regarding alcohol and why I chose to give up, the benefits, how to give up alcohol, how to help someone. So I thought, do you know what, let's address a lot of these questions. Let's see if I can make a positive difference. I can share my journey. Everyone's obviously different. Everyone's experience with alcohol and challenges are very different. But hopefully some of what I say today will either have a positive impact, even if you're just looking to cut down on your alcohol, or if you feel like you have a problem, or if you know someone that might have a bit of an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. So yeah, without further ado, I asked everyone on Instagram to share some questions. We had a lot of questions, I think nearly 300, which was great. I've just chosen 12 because there are a lot of obviously similar questions. I've chosen 12 today, but if anyone has any questions that I don't answer today, feel free to ask in the comments, or if you want to just DM me on Instagram if you want to keep it a bit more private. Obviously, I am not a counsellor. I am not trained in any way with this. I just want to share my experience, and if that has a positive impact, then great. Why did I give up alcohol? So that's probably going to be the biggest question of today. Simple answer is many reasons. I guess as long as I can think back, so even to when I was about 15 or 16, when maybe I had my first interaction with alcohol, it never really agreed with me in terms of how heavily it affected me. One or two drinks would have a bigger impact on me than the average person, and I think that was pretty evident from the early days. And then throughout my sort of late teens and early 20s, I would say that I definitely developed quite an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. And I think often when people ask me, why don't you drink? And that will probably come on to that in more detail later. In society, we often want to put someone in a box. Are you an alcoholic or are you not an alcoholic? And in answer to that question, I wouldn't say it was a traditional sense of alcoholism, but I would say that quite quickly in sort of my early 20s, it became clear that if I had a drink, I couldn't stop. I was addicted to the scenario, the social aspect, but also the actual physical action of drinking. And so, yeah, when I actually look back and reflect now, age nearly 35, I don't think I ever had one or two drinks ever in my entire life. It would always be 5, 6, 10, 12. And then obviously as time went on and alcohol became more freely available and readily available at events, it definitely got out of control. So why do I not drink alcohol? Ultimately because I had to come to a decision for the benefit of my own life, for my relationships with friends, family, loved ones, time had come to give up alcohol and make that tough decision. What I would say to anyone watching this that maybe either thinks they might have a problem with alcohol or knows someone that maybe has an unhealthy relationship with alcohol is that it wasn't as easy as one day I said, I'm not drinking, and then the next day I never drank again. There are people out there that can do that and respect to that, but I think if you have got a problem, the reality is it's a bit of a journey. It can take a bit of time. There's highs, there's lows. It's a bit of a roller coaster. I think probably I started to try and give up alcohol around 25, 26, and then I was 29 by the time that I actually managed to go full cold turkey and not have a drink. I'd give up for maybe 6 months and then I'd fall off the wagon as a tree, and we'll go through that in more detail later in the video. And so, yeah, it definitely took a while to really accept that. But I think ultimately the first key thing is to accept that you personally have a problem. There were many years where people told me I had a problem and I probably didn't listen. And I think the important thing to recognize is, as much as if you are someone that knows someone that might have a problem, telling them all the time maybe isn't the best strategy. And we'll go into that in more detail later, but potentially just supporting that person and highlighting the issue, but maybe doing it with them to try and kickstart that process, because ultimately until that person or until you accept it's your problem, nothing's really ever going to change. So yeah, very long-winded answer as the danger of many of these questions, but ultimately for me, I had a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol and I just needed to cut it out of my life. And it was a lot of hard work and it's taken a long time, but I hand on heart would say it's the best decision I ever made. How did I finally give up? It's interesting because I look back and it doesn't feel like a seminal moment or a particular time, like a particular moment. But I can think back to the last time I had alcohol, which, like most times I had alcohol in the last sort of last 5-6 years of still drinking, didn't end well. I would black out regularly. I wouldn't remember things. A lot of bad things would potentially happen. So the last time I actually had alcohol, obviously classic, I'd wake up the next day. I think I'd come off about 6-7 months of not drinking and then had this incident. And then the next day you wake up, you have shame, you feel guilty, you feel angry at yourself, angry at other people. And it got to a point where I was drinking so much in these sort of incidents that my body would almost shut down. So it would take me about 4 or 5 days to get out of bed after said event. But I think, to be honest, after that time, it really, the penny maybe finally dropped that this was not sustainable, and that friendships, and particularly my relationship, would maybe not last forever if I carried on that quite dark path. So there wasn't like an incident or anything in particular, but I think it was just an accumulation. And when I look back, I think maybe I do wish I'd given up years before. I'm very grateful for everything I have now, and everything worked out. But when I look back, I think I'm quite fortunate that everything worked out. I had lots of chances to give up, and maybe lots of moments that were an indication that I should give up, and I ignored them. So yeah, I think if you're looking for that final moment, I think ultimately first step is to recognize you've got that problem and come up with a bit of a strategy and an initial game plan on how you're going to give up. Don't necessarily put pressure, or you just think about the next few weeks. Don't be thinking about a year's time or whatever. But what I would say is, confidently, with every year that I'm not drinking alcohol, it does become that bit easier and that much more part of routine, and I don't even really think about it anymore. So I've answered lots of questions in that question, but yeah, in terms of, there wasn't a specific moment. When I look back, actually, of all the moments and bad moments I had with alcohol, it actually wasn't a particularly bad night. It was just waking up and feeling that shame that I'd maybe let myself down for the previous 6 months. That's the thing. I'm at a point now where I'm 5.5 years in, and I like telling people that because it maintains that, and it means that there's a lot of people now, including you guys, now I'm sharing this, that I would let down if I was to have a drink. And so, yeah, the longer it goes on, the more you've got to lose, I would argue. Did I lose friends in my decision? I'd say I lost friends because of my drinking, definitely. It damaged relationships for sure. It had an impact on my work at the time, which was in a different industry, in digital advertising, working for startups. It definitely affected that. Did I lose friends because of my drinking? I guess when people ask me how to give up alcohol, and that potentially sometimes people will message me and say, I think I've got a problem, I think my partner's got a problem, I would say that changing your environment and the people that are around you is unfortunately something you have to do. And that's not to say that necessarily the people around you or your environment are the reason, because it's easy to blame other people in these situations, and ultimately it's only you and down to you to make this decision. But what I would say is, combination of, yeah, I lost friends, but equally I chose to lose friends because, albeit they were lovely people, they were not a good influence on me. And they were people that could drink a lot of alcohol, that could go out on nights out and be fine. And I was always trying to keep up. I was always trying to be part of that group. So yeah, in simple answer is yes, I did lose friends, but I don't look back on that with regret, because I've made a lot of new friends. And a lot of friends now that I have either don't drink a lot or don't drink. We've got friends that do still drink, and that's not a problem at all. But ultimately, I wanted to surround myself with people that respected my decision instantly, didn't question it, didn't try and egg me on, or try and say, oh, go on, have a drink, have a couple, why don't you have one? So yeah, I think changing your environment actually is a really important part of any addiction and any sobriety journey. So yeah, simple answer, I did lose friends, but I don't look back on that with regret. I think ultimately the true friends of yours will respect your decision, and anyone that doesn't respect your decision isn't really a true friend. How do I deal with questions as to why I'm not drinking? I guess first of all, I'd start by sort of answering it or saying that I think that it's probably never been more acceptable to not drink. We're very lucky with society. I would say it's changed a lot, even in the last 2 or 3 years. There's a lot of alcohol alternatives. There's a lot of people that don't drink. Younger people aren't drinking as much. I'd say to anyone watching that's outside of the UK, maybe in your country, culturally, alcohol isn't as big a player. I've always looked with admiration to countries like France, Italy and Spain, where alcohol is often alongside food. It centres around meals, social events, but with food. In the UK, I think in the US as well, and of course every country has this, but in the UK in particular, we've got a real big pub culture, which is fantastic for lots of reasons, but drinking is a big part of the culture here, and drinking to excess. And I played a lot of rugby. I worked in sales and in marketing, which is quite an alcohol heavy industry with lots of events with clients. And rugby definitely is a sport I adore, but if I could change one thing about rugby, it would be the drinking culture, because it is unfortunately quite toxic. So I've actually totally forgotten what the question was.
So the question is, how do you deal with the questions as to why you're not drinking?
How do I deal with the questions? Bounce the question. That's how easily I get distracted. Now I find it quite easy to just say I don't drink. I haven't had alcohol for 5.5 years. It's the best decision I ever made. If people want to go deeper, I have no issue in answering that. It depends obviously on who's asking as to the answer I'll give. If it's friends, family, people within a closer circle, I'll be more honest. If it's people I've met at a restaurant or wherever it might be, I'll just say, oh, I might make a joke, to be honest. I might try and make a joke of it just to diffuse it, and just say, oh, well, if you want this restaurant to be in one piece at the end, it's best I don't have a drink, because potentially that could happen. But no, I think it's become more acceptable. I have no issue being asked. What I would say to any of you that comes across people that don't drink, if someone says they don't drink, and that's the first time you've heard that, and they're not maybe a close friend or close relative, I probably wouldn't pry too much, because, yeah, as I say, it can be a sensitive issue. It's important that we talk about these things, and it's important that we normalise not drinking, because actually, I mean, it always stuck with me, I think a quote, I can't remember who said it, but alcohol is the only drug that you kind of have to justify not taking. If someone said to you, why don't you do cocaine? That would just be, you'd be like this, wouldn't you? But it's the only drug, really, maybe aside from caffeine, that you have to justify not having. So it's actually not that unusual or it's not that irregular to say you don't drink alcohol. So I think normalising it, but I think don't be afraid to ask people in the right way, but just judge the situation. I have been at work events, or I have been at events in the past where people ask in quite a sort of pointed way, potentially. I have no issue with that, because I'm quite proud of not drinking now. And I think selfishly sharing this video, I want this video to have a positive impact and hopefully help people, but equally selfishly, it helps my journey, because the more people I tell, as I said earlier, the more people I have to let down. And I think recognising your sobriety and telling people keeps you accountable. So a slight tangent on the question, one technique that someone told me that I met was, if you go to a work event or you're at a dinner party with people you don't know, so you're surrounded by people that don't know you don't drink or that you've got a problem, a tactic early on in the evening is to say, oh no, I don't drink alcohol, I've got alcohol issues, or I've had issues with alcohol, I'm 2 years sober, or whatever. Address it early on, tell people around you, and then that will almost subconsciously help you on that evening if you're still early in your journey, because obviously then you don't want to be seen to be drinking when you've already said you potentially have a problem. As I say, that's just something that's helped me, is recognizing that and sharing that. So yeah, long-winded answer, but ultimately I don't mind being asked. I think with every year it becomes easier. I think if you come across people that say they don't drink, treat it sensitively, but just judge the situation. If they're open to it, don't then ask more questions. If it's a blunt answer, then maybe just step back and let them, crack on, really. Have I ever been tempted by just one drink? Yes, definitely. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. Very, very rarely would I ever have any sort of temptation now, which I'd like to hope any of you watching that are starting that journey or on that journey will get to that point, because it is quite empowering, not feeling that pressure. But I think in the early years, certainly when I gave up for periods of time and then did start drinking, obviously I felt temptation and I gave into the temptation. I think I found certainly changing my environment, not going out. I used to go out in Soho a lot with clients, or sort of Mayfair area. I in the first few years of not drinking, I tended to avoid those locations because I'd associate a certain pub or a certain bar with a wild night out or drinking. And so almost sometimes if you are feeling tempted, just try not to put yourself in that situation. I think rugby is another example. Going to Twickenham, watching the rugby, very synonymous with drinking a pint of Guinness or whatever. And I didn't go for a few years, but everyone's different. I think it depends on how severe your issues are and how much they're affecting your life. I would say that if you're serious about giving up alcohol, you do need to make a few sacrifices initially and then reintroduce those things. On the subject of temptation, I would say to anyone that's watching that does feel they have a problem with alcohol, I wouldn't necessarily give up alcohol and then go straight to the alcohol alternatives like the non-alcoholic beers or whatever, because that can, or I found that to be a bit of a slippery slope, where you might have a non-alcoholic beer or even worse, a non-alcoholic spirit that everyone else in the room thinks is non-alcoholic, for example. That happened to me, and then I was like, oh, I might actually just have a real one, and then suddenly you're having double vodkas with soda and you've fallen off the wagon. So yeah, the temptation, definitely it will happen. And I think it strengthens me, or has strengthened me, because it made me realise I definitely did have a problem. But if you're being tempted, it shows that maybe you have got a problem in some way. So yeah, it's certainly, I'm certainly not free of that completely, but equally, if you shape your life and who you're spending time with and the environment you're in, then hopefully that removes a lot of the temptation. Do I use alcohol in cooking? Interesting one. I don't know if I was using alcohol in cooking in the early years of my sobriety, because the truth is I wasn't cooking as much and I didn't enjoy cooking as much. But it's certainly in the last 3 years, I would always use a bit of alcohol if it's in the recipe or if it's needed. For example, in a gravy or red wine jus, I would use red wine. And I don't find that to be a problem. I guess I could see, thinking of others here, I could see it being a problem, because obviously if you open a bottle of red wine for a red wine jus, for example, you only maybe need half a glass and then you're left with 5.5 glasses. So if you're someone trying to give up, maybe avoid using wine in cooking. Another option obviously could be that you buy it in small batches specifically for cooking. Yeah, so I guess as time's gone on, I feel more confident, because obviously, for anyone that doesn't know, when you cook with wine, you do cook the alcohol off. So you aren't actually consuming any alcohol, it's just the flavour left. But I could see how it could be a slippery slope again. And I think it's important, if you're treating this seriously, to really consider all of these variables. And maybe it's not sensible having alcohol in the house if you're someone that's struggling. But yeah, for me now, 5.5 years in, I do cook with wine. I don't cook with wine regularly because it's actually not great for your health. And not every recipe needs it. But if on the odd occasion I need it, then I will. What do I drink on special occasions? I always find that difficult. Good question. It's a strange one, because in a few years ago, I would always go for like a non-alcoholic beer, or, you know, friends and family have been brilliant buying me lots of different non-alcoholic alternatives. Or alcohol alternatives. To be honest, my go-to now might be a Lucky Saint or a Peroni 0.0. But the funny thing is, as someone that used to drink to excess, right, and I'd have one drink, and then I'd suddenly have had 2 or 3 in the time it took me to have that first one. And as I say, you know, I don't want to be too explicit or open here, but I mean, there are evenings where I probably had 12, 15 pints. There were evenings where I had a whole bottle of vodka. Pretty serious alcohol abuse issues. That I would never be able to just have one. But now I have a non-alcoholic beer, I'll have one, and it's rare that I'll want another. Occasionally I want another, but because there's no alcohol in it, you have one that satisfies, not a craving, but just gives you that feeling that you're part of an event. So I would say there are some great alternatives out there. Maybe I'll do a video, or we'll feature it on the newsletter as we approach sort of the more warmer months, of alternatives. But if you're someone, ultimately this video I'm hoping will have a positive impact for people that are struggling with alcohol. I, once again, wouldn't recommend alcohol alternatives until you're at least a few years sober, personally. But yeah, there are some great ones out there. If you're just looking at cutting down on alcohol, a Guinness 0.0, I wouldn't be able to tell you the difference probably now. Alcohol-free wines are a little bit more iffy, and actually, interestingly, I had an alcohol-free red wine at Christmas, and it didn't make me feel drunk, but I got a rash. I didn't feel great on it, and I wonder if that's because it was so similar to the real thing, potentially. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of alternatives out there. The likes of Seedlip and things like that. I do like the odd one of those in the summer or something, but there's also an aspect, now I'm sharing it more with you and sharing it more on my channels and being a bit more open. Now I'm further in the journey. Being honest and open with you, as I want to be on this video, I also like to project that I'm not drinking, and especially if I'm at an event or something, I wouldn't be too comfortable with something in my hand that looks like alcohol. Not because I care too much about what people think, but equally, in myself, I want to know that I'm not drinking. So I would always go for an non-alcoholic beer and have it in the bottle. And that also is, to be honest, a technique that's important if you are going to give up completely and eventually move on to alcohol alternatives. I'm always very uncomfortable in a pub or a restaurant if I order non-alcoholic beer on draft and they serve it in the same glass as the regular version, and I'll always normally go for the bottle and say you bring the bottle and let them pour it at the table, just so I know that there's no possible cross-contamination, because yeah, I want to maintain that sobriety and the fact that I definitely haven't had any alcohol now for nearly 6 years. So yeah, I think alcohol alternatives are great, and as I say, if you're just looking to cut back on alcohol, they're a great alternative, and I encourage you to try them. If you're looking to go cold turkey and go sober, I think, yeah, once again, just treat them with caution. What positive changes have I noticed since I've been sober? I mean, we could be here forever, and I'm not trying to preach, and I don't want to ever come across like I'm preaching, because that's certainly not what I want to do. But I mean, even just in terms of health, I mean, I'm very fortunate that I am in fairly good shape, and I work hard to be in that shape, but straight away aesthetically, I do look in the gym and there are people that are training a lot and then struggling to lose that weight or keep it off. And I kind of take for granted, and it's only because people have said this to me, I take for granted the amount of calories that I don't consume from drinking, because I think certainly the average Brit, I don't want to generalise too much, but the average Brit will probably drink every Thursday, Friday and Saturday, maybe even on a Sunday. And particularly if you're a guy, girls also drink beer, of course, but if you're a guy and you're drinking a lot of pints, that's a lot of calories. So it's kind of a superpower, actually, not drinking and having the odd one. You can eat more, you can be more relaxed with what you eat potentially, because you're not having all those calories. And it is, you know, once again, not preaching, but the average pint I think is 300 or 400 calories. I mean, it's a lot of calories. Don't quote me on that. I haven't fact checked that, but it's a lot. Other positives, you know, the obvious ones: relationships, friendships, particularly my relationship with Josie, my wife, have improved immeasurably. And do you know what? It's been really nice getting to know new friends, and then actually seeing, hopefully being able to positively impact them by seeing that they're drinking less, or they're trying alcohol alternatives, or they're giving up alcohol, even if it's just for a month. So there's been a lot of positive outcomes. And then in myself, my mental health, I definitely had some really low moments during my drinking, and I'm quite an energetic, hyper person. So it's nice feeling myself. And sleep. I mean, sleep is something that we're all becoming more and more aware of. And, you know, sometimes I do think it's interesting that people are spending a lot of money on technology and things to help them sleep. But actually, you know, the easiest thing you can do if you're not sleeping well is just give up alcohol for a bit, give your body a rest. How does sobriety elevate discipline in other areas of my life? I guess I'm always cautious with saying these sort of things, but I don't know the most sort of politically correct way of saying it, and I'm quite outspoken. So I definitely am not clinically, I don't clinically have OCD, but I do have a lot of tendencies that are quite obsessive, which I think probably played into my issues with alcohol, if I'm honest. I'm all or nothing in everything in my life. And I guess the sobriety has given me that strength that I'm able to commit to something at long term. As I say, nearly 6 years. You'll be bored of me saying that by the end, but every milestone is a celebration. That's another thing that I think is important to recognize, whether it's a month, whether it's 4 months, even when I get to 6, 7, 8 years, I'll keep celebrating, because every year is another milestone. But I'd say that it has given me strength to be able to sort of show that I can commit to something long term. but I guess also it shows to family members and everyone that you're committed to making a positive change. And you know what? I think in life, even if you're someone that doesn't have huge issues with alcohol, but you want to prove to yourself that you could give up for a month or 2 months, then why not try it? And it will give you that sense of achievement. But yeah, it's definitely fed into it. I guess subconsciously it's probably given me a little bit more confidence and ability, control over my life. But I've always been someone that's always wanted to control every aspect of my life. So I guess it kind of ties in with that character trait, some of which is a positive, but of course there's negatives to that as well. But yeah, it's something that I don't, it's off topic, but I don't wake up every day and think I'd like a drink. I don't wake up every day and think I'm not drinking anymore. It's become part of my routine now. And of course there are moments and testing moments like we all have, but it's become very much the norm for me now. And I guess anyone watching that fears the future, if they've got problems now and are hoping to give up, it does get a hell of a lot easier. And that's not to say that you won't have moments of weakness, but it's in those moments that you should lean on your friends and family. But ultimately it does, with every year, become that bit more straightforward. How do you support someone to see they have a problem? I guess this is a question I get, as I said at the beginning of the video, I get asked questions all the time on Instagram and I'm always happy to answer. I do often message if there's a question like this and say, look, if you think it's really bad and really serious, then please do consult a professional, because as I say, I'm not a professional and I'm just sharing my experience in the hope it has a positive impact. But what I would say is, comparing it to my journey, I think Josie and my family tried lots of different techniques and really supported me through my challenges. And there were definitely some really dark times. And ultimately, I think it depends on the person, but showing you care, basically treating it like it's not you're in the wrong, you need to sort this out. And it's not, you've got a problem, and very much putting it on the person. I think maybe a more tailored approach where you're like, look, I think you've maybe got a bit of an issue with alcohol. Why don't the two of us, whether that's your friend, sibling, partner, do this together? Maybe try a few months of not drinking, see if it has a positive impact on your life and our relationship, and go from there. That would be maybe one technique. As I say, there's no one size fits all in these situations. If it is really serious, then obviously maybe you need to get some professional help, get them to speak to a therapist. I spoke to a therapist for about 6 months, once a week, when we lived in London. I'm trying to think what year this would have been, at the peak of my problems. And do you know what? There were times I was going in there and I had had a drink and fallen off the wagon, and I lied to the therapist, but they kind of knew. And for me personally, that really helped, having someone outside of my friendship group and outside of my family to speak to and offload on. And I think that definitely, actually thinking about it, played a big role in me eventually giving up. So I think that's always an avenue. But I think ultimately just being supportive and showing you care and being patient, because I think, like anything, don't treat it like, please don't, if you are someone that's helping someone, my advice would be, try not to treat it like if you were with someone that's fallen off a diet. It's not to say that diets are trivial, but it's a bit more serious than that. So if someone slips and falls off the wagon, I can tell you now, having been there, they're going to feel a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. And they don't necessarily need someone shouting and telling them that more. The arm round the shoulder technique, I think, will work more than that other approach. But then equally, if it's something that just keeps happening and keeps going on, maybe you do need to say, look, if things don't change, then things in our life will have to change. I think, look, it's judging each situation and ultimately being there for that person, and bringing other people into the situation, whether that be professionals or family members or other friends. Because I think if enough people tell you that they're supporting you, but also they think you have a problem, I think you as the individual will finally, hopefully, appreciate that maybe it isn't just that one individual that thinks you've got an issue. What would I say to a younger Charlie pre-sobriety? It's difficult, because do I have regrets? I think rather than saying I have regrets, I think the simple fact is I'm very fortunate and very lucky. I feel very lucky for the life that we live, the job that we have, my relationships, my friendships, my family. And I think, if I'm honest, I think they all stuck with me beyond what some friends and family and Josie would have. So I guess when taking that into account, I probably would say to a younger Charlie, look, just accept that you've got a problem, that alcohol is not for you, that alcohol is not the be all or end all of life, and that there's a lot of fun and a lot of enjoyment that can be had away from drinking. Because I think there were probably times in my 20s when you're going out a lot and all your friends are going out more, that there's that whole FOMO, that fear of missing out. And I think that happened a lot for me. And it's that acceptance that you can still have a beautiful and very positive life without this drug, alcohol. And it sounds crazy when you say it out loud, but the reality is everyone, and not everyone, a lot of people's lives, certainly in their free time, revolve around alcohol. You know, all meeting at a pub, all meeting at a bar. Now, that's not to put down a pub, because I love pubs, but I'll only ever go to a pub that does good food now, rather than just for a beer. But I think it's, yeah, so telling a younger Charlie that there is hope, that there's other people that have the similar problems, that there's a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of things that can be done to, instead of going out drinking, whether that be going, you know, and I think one thing I've not talked about in this video, and obviously I could talk forever and I don't want to bore people to death with this, but I think finding other things you're passionate about to distract you from alcohol. So as I say, a lot of social events. When I first moved to London, you know, Saturday, people would be drinking at lunchtime, and that would be the whole day. You'd go watch the sport in the pub, you'd go out in the evening and drink. Maybe designing your days around other things. Fitness and cooking are the two things for me that I became very passionate about. And particularly fitness kind of is at odds a little bit with the drinking culture in this country. So I think finding a sport you love, finding a community maybe centered around fitness, to give you something different. And yeah, I mean, look, I think it does become slightly easier as you get older, but I would say that I probably would tell a younger Charlie, maybe this is the time to give up when I was 25, and I'd be sat here now with nearly 10 years sobriety, and probably, you know, a few friendships that weren't damaged. So yeah, I would probably say, look, it's acknowledging and accepting it earlier. I probably lied to myself for a number of years and kept saying to myself, no, other people think I have a problem, but you know, do you know what? They don't know the real me. I don't have a problem. And I kept searching for that ability to just have one drink or just have two, and it never happened. So I think if you're in doubt, and if you fear you might be at the start of that, just acknowledge that now. It doesn't mean it's forever, but make some changes now. Don't let it drag out, because I think luck played a big role in where I am today, and it could have been very different. As with any video on this channel, I do tend to ramble a little bit, so I hope that wasn't too rambly. We had lots of questions, lots that I haven't answered. I tried to address what I felt were the most important questions, but thank you to everyone that asked questions. And yeah, as I say, my inbox on Instagram is always open for DMs, and equally, please feel free to comment in the comments. As I say, there'll be lots of you watching this that don't have an issue with alcohol, but I would encourage you, as it's quite empowering, to give alcohol a break from time to time, or potentially, yeah, consider cutting back at times to see how you feel. Because I've certainly seen a positive impact in friends and family that have been inspired by my journey, and obviously the fact that drinking is becoming less of a cultural focus, I would say. But yeah, thanks for watching. Most of my videos will always be centered around cooking or food, but it was nice to get a few things off my chest. I hope it's helped. Even if one person benefits from this in a positive way, then I'll have achieved what I wanted. And as I say, there is a selfish element, because from my perspective on my journey, the more I share, the stronger I feel in my own life with alcohol. So yeah, thank you for the support. If you like the video, obviously please like the video, and feel free to ask any questions in the comments, and we will see you in the next video.